we are trying to garner more networks, investment banking partners into the country and help them to help our clients.
Welcome to Times Online. Today we have with us Mr. Harshana Jayaweera, the new CEO of NDB Investment Bank, to take us through his plans for the company in the future. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dilto. Pleasure to be here.
Harshana, let's start with your role at NDB Investment. How has the last year gone in this role?
Last year had been quite fantastic for us. Our pipeline to start with was quite strong, and it was a matter of execution in terms of the transactions that we had in our pipeline. While we had certain challenges to adhere to, both from legal compliance kind of perspectives and also as operational, we managed to overcome those things and deliver our services to our clients. So it had been a very good year.
The industry of investment banking in the country, what is your take on it?
Coming back to Sri Lanka after quite a long time overseas, I think there's quite a bit of a disconnect in terms of investment banking, what I have seen outside as well as what we have practiced here. So in a typical investment banking world outside, you would see a plethora of products and services being offered to the client, whereas our investment banking has not grown in the Sri Lankan market to the level that it should have been exposed to or developed to. So we were looking at pure simple IPO type of transactions on the equity capital market side, or debenture issuances, which is a bond issuance in the debt capital market side, with M&A bit of coming under corporate advisory. So the structured financings, arranging or cross-border transactions, getting into new products in terms of debt raises or capital raises had been there, but with certain challenges. So I think that may be a reason that it has not grown as much as we would have expected it to, but hopefully we should be getting there as well. So that could be the main challenge in terms of the local market.
In terms of getting into this whole nitty-gritty of investment banking, as you explained, what are your plans for the future for your company?
We, as the arguably the largest investment banking house in the country, we have our market share, which we tend to grow in the domestic market, but one key thing that we try to do is to follow our clients. So most of our large institutional clients have grown overseas as well. So we try to support them and provide our services in cross-border transactions as well. We are trying to garner more networks, investment banking partners into the country and help them to help our clients grow. So we are trying to see our expansion going into this year and for the next 3 years, going into the Southeast Asian markets as well as the Middle East and African markets. So that's the expansion plan that we see, but also following our clients in these markets.
NDB Investment Bank did a very large transaction recently. Could you please unpack that for us?
So this was for Maldives Airport Company, probably the largest employer in Maldives, and that was a refinancing transaction of around $40 million through a structured syndicated term loan facility, getting banks from Sri Lanka as well as Maldives participating on the deal. It was a grueling experience, obviously, because it has taken a lot of time to conclude because of various challenges which comes naturally with a transaction like this. But like I said, that structuring capability and the knowledge of the team helped us get us through this kind of a transaction to go there, so to successfully conclude it.
Going forward, Harshana, would you see more such transactions coming your way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's something which I'm actually pushing towards as well, because that would give us more exposure in terms of doing more cross-border transactions, as well as it brings in a lot of much needed revenue to the country as well, right? Just rather than doing more domestic ones, but that's our bread and butter anyways. So we are trying to see how we can expand our markets and also create new partnerships for the country.
It's very interesting you mentioned bread and butter and the business of investment banking. Don't you think that our landscape in investment banking is a bit crowded, because virtually every bank has it, or separately there are investment banking entities. What is your take on this?
Competition is a challenge. I would look at it in two ways. Competition is good and healthy, and it gives a choice to the clients or the corporates that we deal with in terms of who to go with. It gives them the chance of picking up the right knowledge set. So not everybody is perfect in everything, right? So they can pick and choose whoever that has that particular set of expertise, the required skill set. At the same time, on the flip side, you can see that there could be price competition which comes into play. You have to understand that certain services and that skill set comes at a certain price. So we are trying to navigate through that at the moment.
You mentioned expanding businesses overseas to the Southeast Asian countries, etc. What about growth? Will it be organic or will you look at acquisitions in the future?
It's more through partnerships, because during my overseas experience, I have managed to get a lot of partnerships coming in to work with me. So I'm just trying to leverage that and giving that partnership arrangements to the bank, so that we can run multiple transactions at a time, and then that torch baton or the torch is passed on to the team. So that's where it comes from. You may not need to have an organic growth or a local presence in any of these countries for the time being, but come what may, in time we'll see how it goes, and that we'll take that call at that point in time.
Last month in January, the Securities and Exchange Commission, together with the Colombo Stock Exchange, organized an investment forum in the Middle East, and they were very successful with it. And there were lots of calls for investment in Sri Lanka, partnerships and things like that. Will you be exploring these ties going forward?
Yes, I think that was a very good initiative by the regulators to do this. It's very different for an IB to do this on their own as opposed to getting a government related stakeholder doing that. So that kind of initiative is really helpful in terms of reaching out into these overseas market, and that would definitely have momentum, not necessarily for us but for all the IBs in Sri Lanka. So that's a very good thing. So we would definitely use that as a stepping stone to grow more and see how many more we can get into partnerships and investors to come into the country.
Sri Lankan capital market is on a growth momentum, on a very high growth momentum. When you take an investment bank and the kind of investors that we see in this country, could you just unpack for us, as against your experience overseas, the differences and the challenges that you have faced with investors, the domestic investors here, and when you were working overseas?
So if you take the domestic investors, they are more yield driven, transactional driven. They would look at what kind of returns that they would get in terms of any sort of investment to that matter. On the other hand, if we look at our issuers, the borrowers in the country, if they are looking at an overseas person to come in, they would compare what they can get in Sri Lanka as opposed to what kind of a skill set, investment or an expertise that you can get from overseas. If I sit on the other side of the table and look from a overseas investor's perspective, what I have seen is they look at Sri Lanka as a frontier market and with a certain amount of rating. So they have certain challenges to meet when they are investing into a CCC country or a frontier market country, and what kind of ticket sizes that they can get into. So there are certain gaps between the lip and the cup, right? So that's what we have to manage, and that's something that our local borrowers or the issuers needs to understand. It may come in as a price factor, or it could be a structuring related security that they would be looking at. So it can be various ways of mitigating that, but people here should be able to be open for that, so that you can get these investors who are willing to invest in the country to come and do their investments accordingly.
Moving forward, there's a huge call by the capital market regulator as well as the capital market operator for listings of private companies into the stock exchange. That means essentially IPOs, or by way of introduction. How are we on that front?
I think if you are looking from a more mature private companies, it's a matter of educating them and getting them to that stepping stone and getting up that stage. But if you look at slightly more small and medium term type of customers, these ones will have an issue in terms of getting their house in order. So the corporate advisory of the IBs in Sri Lanka will have a bigger role to play there, because they need to advise these clients to get their accounts in order, the governance in order, the operational facts in order, because there are certain parameters and benchmarks that they need to meet when you are at a listing. So there's a lot of work that the IBs can do from that perspective, getting these companies to come up to the level that that they are IPO ready, right? So there's quite a lot of business there. I think all the IBs are looking at that in various segments. It could be industry driven or it could be revenue segment driven, whatever that is. So it's been done, it's on the way.
Moving forward, the startup businesses in the country, there are issues in raising capital for them. The regulator and the Ministry of Finance and all other related authorities are working towards startup funds and bringing them into the country and making it easier for them to invest in Sri Lanka. In this space, what will NDB Investment Bank be doing?
Primarily, we would be helping this kind of startups and clients to get into that venture capital space. We have to make sure that they are ready to face that relevant investors, because startup investors are high risk tolerant but at the same time highly demanding, right? So there are ways of like Series A, Series B kind of funding which comes into play. So they need to be ready to make sure that their questions are answered, and so that they are ready to get that investment coming into the country and to their company. So that's where we make this venture capital advisory type of work workable and get them ready for these kind of investments to come in. From the other side, I think if you take like Lanka Impact Investment Network and all, they are doing a tremendous job in terms of setting up funds. They are not big scale funds, but giving that relevant shock that they need in terms of getting the relevant funding and making it available for them. So that's another way of looking at it. We are kind of helping these companies or the startups to look at the Series A, Series B funding and how they are supposed to get there. That corporate advisory role, we are taking that up very seriously.
Harshana, what is your take on the growth of the capital market in the country for the next year?
I would say next year would be slightly short term, but if you ask me during the next 3 years what I would like to see, and I think our regulators are working towards that, which I'm fully in line with them, is to look at a far more diverse product segment in the capital markets as opposed to what we have. Not necessarily the IPOs and the equity markets or the bond market, but in terms of derivative, the commodity structured products available to the market. And with the regulatory framework coming into the banking space, there's far more opportunity for the corporates to raise capital out of the capital market framework as opposed to just going into the banks. So from that perspective, there are a lot of new products that is under discussion, and I would like to see that happening far more quicker than what it is at the moment.
For sure. When you look at the investment banking aspect in Sri Lanka and the capital markets, what are the ease in regulations that you would like to see?
I don't see in terms of ease of regulation per se, but I think understanding of the product and the risk parameters related to that particular product and a quick turnaround time would be the way to look at it. I wouldn't compromise on the risk component of a product because it's a public product and less investors who will be coming in. So keeping that intact, I think a far quicker turnaround time in terms of actively introducing products into the market would be the key here. So once it is there, when it's tested in the market, liquidity automatically will improve when people are more familiar with the product and it's widely traded, then that's where you can create that momentum.
What are your plans for the future for NDB Investment Bank?
We would definitely grow our markets. Not we started initially domestically. We have done cross-border transactions. So what we are looking at now going forward is onshore to offshore, which we have done. Offshore to onshore to bring in other investors coming into the country. Then our last step over the next couple of years would be to do offshore to offshore, basically complete offshore transactions in other markets, bringing in other investors, offshore investors as well. So that's what we are trying to get there, because then we would become a truly regional or a global investment bank. That's what we are trying to do.
Thank you very much for those insights and unpacking the future plans for the company. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.